He has broken the covenant. His departure is unacceptable.
Dominic, though uneasy, nods silently. He has seen the ring's power before and knows what is coming. Matthew wasn't the first person to leave the house of divine glory, and they all met their doom. For the first time in years, the confident, powerful pastor is reduced to a weeping son. As her condition worsens, he grows desperate. He clutches the ring, holding it close as he whispers frantic prayers, pleading with it to save her. You've given me power, influence, everything I ever wanted. Now, I beg you, bring my mother back to life. But the ring does nothing. It glows faintly in response, almost mocking him. Mama Agnes takes her final breath, leaving Dominic to grapple with the unbearable weight of her loss.
Previously on The False Prophet and the Ring of Power. When Grace confessed she was pregnant, Dominic was furious. Fear consumed him as the herbalist's warning echoed in his mind. Dominic's anger turned cold and calculating. He decided the pregnancy had to be terminated by any means necessary.
Well, well. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, you need to subscribe.
Dominic didn't trust just anyone with the secret, but there was one person he thought he could rely on. His most loyal assistant, Brother Matthew. You see, Brother Matthew has been with Pastor Dominic way before the wealth and fame. Even though he had no idea how Pastor Dominic's life transformed, he has never doubted the anointing, not even for once. Even when people gossip about Pastor Dominic and how no one who leaves his church prospers, Brother Matthew will rise and speak against such people and make them realize they are doomed for speaking ill against the anointed man of God. One faithful day, Brother Matthew was passing by the hallway after a Tuesday Bible lesson. He couldn't help but overhear the hushed whispers of Sister Emma and her cohorts. They spoke of Pastor Dominic with a tone of disdain. He's not what he seems, Sister Emma said, her voice low and conspiratorial. Have you noticed how no one who leaves this church ever prospers? Brother Matthew's eyes narrowed, his heart stirring with a mix of anger and sadness. How could they speak so ill of the man who had dedicated his life to serving the Lord? He took a deep breath, his voice calm and steady as he approached the group. Sister Emma, I don't think it's right to speak ill of Pastor Dominic. He's a man of God, and we should respect his anointing. Sister Emma's eyes flashed with defiance. And what do you know, Brother Matthew? You're just a blind follower. I know that Pastor Dominic has dedicated his life to serving the Lord, Brother Matthew replied, his voice firm. I know that he has helped countless people through his ministry, and I know that we should be supporting him, not tearing him down. And you are one of the benefactors? Or was it not just last week you came begging the finance department to help pay your house rent? Let's call a spade a spade. You of all people should not be found in such a mix. The others in the group gave Sister Emma a disregarding look, but one of Sister Emma's cohorts, Brother James, spoke up. But what about all the rumor? What about all the people who have left the church and never looked back? Brother Matthew shook his head. Rumor are just that, rumor. And as for those who have left the church, perhaps they were never truly committed to the Lord's work. Sister Emma snorted. You're just drinking the Kool-Aid, Brother Matthew. Brother Matthew's face remained calm, but his eyes flashed with conviction. I'm not drinking anything. I'm simply standing up for what I believe in. And I believe in Pastor Dominic and his ministry. The group dispersed, their faces flushed with embarrassment. Sister Emma shot Brother Matthew a withering glance before storming off. But all of this is about change. After Grace broke the news to Pastor Dominic, he called Brother Matthew into his office. Matthew was a man known for his unwavering dedication and blind loyalty to Dominic. Grace is carrying a child, Dominic said, his voice low but firm. Matthew's eyes widened in shock. A child. But Reverend, you said. Dominic cut him off with a wave of his hand. I know what I said. This cannot happen. You will arrange for her to get rid of it. Matthew hesitated but nodded. As you wish, Reverend. Matthew approached Grace with Dominic's instructions, insisting she come with him for a medical checkup. Reluctantly, she agreed, still shaken by Dominic's reaction to her pregnancy. She was taken to a discreet clinic on the outskirts of the city, where Matthew handed over a large sum of cash to the doctor. The doctor performed the procedure, assuring Matthew that the pregnancy had been terminated successfully. Grace, weak and disoriented, was handed an envelope filled with money and sent away with strict instructions to never return to the church. Heartbroken and abandoned, Grace wandered the streets, unsure where to go or what to do. The man she had trusted had cast her aside, and she felt utterly alone. But as night fell, she saw the glowing cross of a small church in the distance. Desperate and weary, she stumbled toward it. Inside, she collapsed on the floor, weeping uncontrollably. The church's caretaker, an elderly woman named Mama Esther, found her and gently lifted her up. "My child, what is wrong?" Mama Esther asked, her voice filled with compassion. Through tears, Grace recounted her story. Mama Esther took her in, providing her with food, shelter, and comfort. Over the next few weeks, Grace began to heal physically and emotionally. Following Grace's ordeal, Brother Matthew begins to spiral emotionally and spiritually. He questions every decision that led him to this point and his unwavering loyalty to Dominic. Haunted by visions of Grace crying out for help, Matthew spends his nights pacing his small room, clutching his Bible, and whispering desperate prayers of forgiveness. Doubt begins to creep in. One late evening, while tidying up Dominic's office after a long service, Matthew notices a faint light coming from behind a cabinet. Curious, he moves it aside to reveal a hidden door. Behind the door is a small room filled with ominous symbols, jars of herbs, and a black altar. At its center rests the ring. The air feels heavy, and a low hum fills Matthew's ears as he steps closer. He instinctively knows this place is not of God. As Matthew inspects the room, he realizes this is the true source of Dominic's power. The miracles, the wealth, the influence, it all stems from the ring, not divine intervention. Matthew is overcome with fear, whispering to himself, "What have I been a part of?" Dominic walks in unexpectedly, his face darkening as he sees Matthew in the hidden room. "What are you doing here?" Dominic's voice is sharp, and his presence fills the room with an unsettling tension. Matthew, trembling but resolute, replies, "This is wrong, Reverend. This is not of God. You've led us astray." Dominic's calm demeanor cracks, and his voice rises in anger. "You don't understand what's at stake. Do you think we would have come this far on faith alone? Everything I've done has been for this church, for its followers. You are in no place to question me or my decision. This is between me and my God." After this confrontation, Matthew begins to subtly distance himself from Dominic and the church's practices. He avoids tasks involving him personally catering to Pastor Dominic's needs. He makes excuses to skip private prayer sessions with Dominic. He recalls Sister Emma's words a couple of weeks back, when she said, "You're just drinking the Kool-Aid, Brother Matthew." He thought to himself, sometimes we need to question what we're told, even from the pulpit. Matthew finds solace in his prayers, asking for God's guidance to expose the truth without bringing harm to others. Dominic notices Matthew's growing distance and begins to grow suspicious. He catches wind of Matthew's conversations with congregants and confronts him. "You're becoming a problem, Matthew," Dominic says coldly. "You don't want to be a problem, do you?" Matthew's silence speaks volumes, confirming Dominic's fears. Unaware of the spiritual covenant tied to the ring, Matthew decides he can no longer stay at the house of divine glory. He packs his belongings and resigns, leaving a brief note on Dominic's desk. When Dominic finds the letter on his desk the morning after Matthew's departure, his initial reaction is one of shock. He reads the letter once, then again, his hands trembling slightly. "Dear Reverend Dominic, for years, I have stood by your side, believing in the vision you painted for this ministry. I gave my loyalty without question, my heart without reservation, and my soul without hesitation, trusting that we were building something greater than ourselves, something truly of God. But now I see the truth, and it breaks me in ways words cannot express. I have seen miracles that were not born of heaven and sacrifices that were never asked for by our Lord. I have watched lives unravel in the name of faith, and I can no longer lie to myself about the source of it all. I have prayed endlessly for clarity, asking God to show me the path I must take, and now I understand. Staying here, continuing down this path, would mean betraying everything I have ever believed in. It would mean betraying the God I have sworn to serve. My heart grieves for what we could have been. I grieve for the trust I placed in you, and for the man I thought you were. I cannot stay. I am taking the first step back toward the God who never abandoned me, even when I lost my way. May God forgive us both for the choices we've made. With a heavy heart, Matthew. The depth of Matthew's words unsettles him in a way he has not felt in years. For a moment, he feels a pang of guilt, sorrow, but he quickly dismisses it. Foolishness, he mutters to himself, crumpling the letter and tossing it aside. The voice in his head said, Matthew was weak. He couldn't handle the weight of this ministry. As the day progresses, Dominic's emotions shift from denial to anger. How dare he? Dominic fumes. After everything I've done for him, after everything he owes me, he begins to pace his office, muttering aloud. His thoughts race, imagining what Matthew might do with the knowledge he now holds. Did he talk to anyone? Did he spread rumors? Does he plan to come back and destroy me? Dominic's paranoia grows, fueled by the whispers of the spirits bound to the ring. Their voices hiss in his mind. No one sees the altar and lives beside you. He will pay with his life. The spirits bound to the ring do not take betrayal lightly. That night, as Dominic places the ring on the altar, he hears the spirits whisper.
He has broken the covenant. His departure is unacceptable.
Dominic, though uneasy, nods silently. He has seen the ring's power before and knows what is coming. Matthew wasn't the first person to leave the house of divine glory, and they all met their doom. Mama Agnes, Dominic's mother, had a fallout with her son. After years of watching her son rise to prominence, Mama Agnes begins to feel the weight of unfulfilled dreams. Dreams of holding a grandchild in her arms, seeing Pastor Dominic establish a family, and ensuring their lineage continues. Her pride in Dominic's achievements starts to mix with frustration, and her pleas for him to marry become frequent and urgent. At first, Dominic dodges her requests with vague reassurances. Mother, the time isn't right. God's work takes precedence. But Mama Agnes grows increasingly persistent. She begins to involve church elders, subtly urging them to encourage Dominic to find a wife. This irritates Dominic, who is haunted by the oath he made with the herbalist. These words echo in his mind.
You must never father a child, Pastor Dominic. If you dare, this will be your end, and you pay dearly with your life.
One fateful day, Mama Agnes arranges for Dominic to meet a young, devout woman from the congregation whom she believes would make the perfect wife. She surprises him with the meeting after a Sunday service, confident he will be pleased. However, Dominic reacts explosively. Why can't you trust me to decide when the time is right? Stop meddling in my life, he snaps, storming away. Hurt but undeterred, Mama Agnes confronts him that evening in his mansion. The argument spirals out of control. I gave everything for you to become the man you are today, she shouts. Pastor Dominic was shocked. He then replied, Everything? And what did it cost you, Mother? No, I am just curious. Can you spit out the details so I can comprehend? You have no idea the price I paid for this life, he retorts, his voice trembling with anger. In his frustration, Dominic lets slip part of the truth. You wanted me to have power. Now I have power and kings at my fingertips. You wanted me to rise above all others. This I have done, and am sure I have exceeded your imagination. Even Dad will be pleased with me, or maybe not, and now you want a grandchild? You don't get to ask for everything. You don't even get to ask for nothing. Not after the sacrifice I made to please you. Confused and alarmed, Mama Agnes demands an explanation. Under pressure, Dominic breaks down and reveals the dark secret he has been hiding for years. The oath he swore to the herbalist to never father a child. A curse tied to the ring that fuels his power. You took me there. You wanted this life for me. And now you want me to die so you can have a grandson? The revelation shatters Mama Agnes. She is overwhelmed with guilt, realizing the weight of the burden her ambition placed on her son. Her dream of seeing her son succeed which led her to that fateful visit to the herbalist, has come at an unimaginable cost. Dominic, I didn't know. I never meant for this to happen, she whispers, tears streaming down her face. But Dominic, consumed by resentment and guilt, cannot hear her remorse. You wanted me to be great, Mother. Well, here I am, the greatest of them all, paying the price for your dreams. Are you happy now? Dominic storms out, leaving Mama Agnes broken and devastated. She retreats into solitude, her health deteriorating as she struggles with the guilt and grief of what she has set in motion. A few weeks later, Mama Agnes collapses in her home. On her deathbed, she sends word for Dominic. The news of Mama Agnes's illness hits Pastor Dominic hard. Despite their fallout, he rushes to her bedside, guilt weighing heavily on him. When he enters the room, the sight of his once vibrant mother lying weak and frail shatters him. Her breathing is labored, her voice faint. Mama, I'm here, Dominic says, his voice trembling. She turns her gaze toward him, a bittersweet smile on her face. My son, I only wanted what was best for you. I am sorry for the burden I placed on you, my son. You have achieved greatness, but at what cost? I pray that you find peace and a way to break free from this curse. Remember, no power is greater than God's. Overwhelmed, Dominic breaks down in tears, clutching her hand tightly. For the first time in years, the confident, powerful pastor is reduced to a weeping son. As her condition worsens, he grows desperate. He clutches the ring, holding it close as he whispers frantic prayers, pleading with it to save her. You've given me power, influence, everything I ever wanted. Now, I beg you, bring my mother back to life. But the ring does nothing. It glows faintly in response, almost mocking him. Mama Agnes takes her final breath, leaving Dominic to grapple with the unbearable weight of her loss. The burial. Mama Agnes's burial becomes the largest the city has ever seen. Thousands gather to honor the woman who raised one of the most influential pastors of their time. Prominent politicians, business magnates, and religious leaders fill the congregation, all dressed in somber tones. The ceremony is a grand affair, with a choir singing solemn hymns and mourners paying their respects in droves. But it is Pastor Dominic's eulogy that leaves everyone in tears. He stands at the podium, his voice cracking as he begins. My mother was my rock, my compass, and my greatest supporter. She was the only one who truly knew me and loved me unconditionally. No matter how far I rose, she never let me forget where I came from. Her love was fierce, her wisdom unmatched, and her belief in me unwavering. Today, I lay to rest the one person who saw me for who I am and still stood by my side. I will never forget her sacrifices, her prayers, and her love. Rest well, Mama. I promise I will honor your memory for the rest of my life. The crowd erupts in tears and applause, touched by Dominic's heartfelt words. As the burial concludes and the crowd disperses, Dominic stands alone by the grave, clutching the ring in his hand. He whispers, I'm sorry, Mama, I failed you. The weight of his secrets feels heavier than ever, knowing he has no one left who understands the burden he carries. This moment marks a turning point for Dominic. His grief deepens his inner conflict, amplifying his guilt and anger toward the path he's chosen. The loss of his mother leaves Pastor Dominic hollow. Despite the grand burial and the heart-wrenching eulogy he delivers, he feels nothing but despair. The grief, guilt, and isolation weigh heavily on him. Mama Agnes was the only person who truly knew him, the son behind the pulpit, the man behind the ring. With her gone, the burden of his secret feels unbearable. Unable to shake the haunting image of her lifeless body, Dominic makes a decision. He must find the herbalist. He resolves to return the cursed ring, undo the pact, and free himself from the price he knows he will one day have to pay. Disguised in plain clothes and traveling incognito, Pastor Dominic ventures into the remote village where he first met the herbalist. Every step of the journey is fraught with doubt and fear. As he draws closer, memories of his oath and the herbalist's cryptic warnings replay in his mind like a drumbeat. When he finally arrives at the herbalist's shrine, he is greeted by the same air of foreboding as before. The herbalist, aged but still exuding an unnerving power, greets him with a knowing smirk. "You return, but not for thanks," the herbalist says, his voice laced with mockery. Dominic places the ring on the shrine's altar and kneels before the herbalist. "I want no more of this. Take it back. Free me from this curse," he pleads. The herbalist chuckles darkly. "There is no undoing a pact once sealed. The ring's power has bound you, body and soul. Return it? Ha! The one who eats with the devil must always stomach his feast." Dominic feels a chill run through him. Then what am I to do? Live with this torment? The herbalist leans closer, his voice almost a whisper. "The question is not what you will do, but when the ring will ask for more. The price for power is never paid in full." Shaken and defeated, Dominic leaves the shrine, clutching the ring as if it burns his hand. The herbalist's words echo in his mind as he begins the long journey back to the city. When he returns to his church, Dominic throws himself into his ministry with renewed fervor, trying to drown his anguish in sermons and service. He preaches louder, performs miracles with more spectacle, and gains more followers. But none of it fills the void left by his mother's death. Each time he places the ring on his finger, he feels its power surge, but the weight of its curse grows heavier. In his quiet moments, he stares at it, wondering not if but when it will demand its ultimate price. Dominic now lives a dual reality. Outwardly, he is the powerful and charismatic pastor adored by his congregation. Inwardly, he is a man haunted by his sins, his pact, and the knowledge that his reckoning is inevitable. The grief for his mother never truly leaves him. It fuels his determination to keep up appearances, but it also serves as a reminder of the consequences of his choices. He continues his ministry work knowing full well that the day will come when the devil will call for the rest of his soul. This is why the departure of Brother Matthew really broke him, as this is the third person he grew fond of who left him. It now seems like the ring is isolating him from people who he can call family. Alone in his office later that evening, Dominic retrieves the crumpled letter from the trash. He smooths it out on his desk and reads it again, this time more slowly. The words cut deeper now, as though Matthew's spirit lingers in the room. He picks up his Bible from a nearby shelf and flips through the pages, searching for comfort. His eyes fall on Matthew 7:15. "Beware of false prophets, which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves." For a fleeting moment, Dominic wonders if the verse is about him, but then his gaze shifts to the ring on his finger. Its faint glow steady and reassuring. A low voice whispers in his mind, "You've come too far to turn back now." Dominic slams the Bible shut and places it back on the shelf. Matthew was wrong, he tells himself firmly. This is the price of greatness. To maintain his grip on the congregation, Dominic frames Matthew's departure as a personal failing on Matthew's part. During the next Sunday service, Dominic speaks to the congregation. "Our dear brother Matthew has chosen to step away from this ministry to seek clarity and personal growth. Let us pray for him, that he may find the peace he needs and return to the path God has set before him." His words are measured, but there's a subtle undertone of warning. It is not for us to question God's servants. Those who waver in their faith risk losing the blessings God has promised. The congregation listens intently, some nodding in agreement, while others whisper among themselves, wondering what truly happened. Even as he builds his empire further, Dominic can't escape the feeling that Matthew's departure marks the beginning of the end. Months pass, and Pastor Dominic resumes his life as though nothing has changed. His sermons are fiery, his congregation grows, and his ministry reaches new heights of fame, but destiny is about to flip its card on Pastor Dominic. One day, as Grace was cleaning the small room Mama Esther had given her, Grace felt a strange movement in her belly. Shocked, she placed her hands on her stomach. "It can't be," she whispered. Mama Esther arranged for her to see a local doctor, who confirmed the miraculous truth. Despite the procedure, Grace was still pregnant. "This child is meant to be," the doctor said with a smile. Grace wept tears of joy and renewed faith. She realized that no matter what Dominic had done, her child had survived by the grace of God. Matthew attempts to start a new life in a nearby town, finding work and reconnecting with his faith. For the first time in years, he feels a glimmer of hope. However, strange occurrences begin to haunt him. Sometimes he wakes up to find claw-like scratches on his body. One evening, while driving home, Matthew's car veers off the road and crashes into a tree. And just like that, Matthew was pronounced dead at the scene, and news of his death spreads quickly. But before then, Brother Matthew has gone in search of Grace in the hope to rewrite his wrongs and seek for forgiveness. Grace had gone into hiding, leaving no trail for fear of being tracked by Dominic or his followers. But Matthew is relentless, following whispers and old contacts until one day, he spots her entering a modest church in a rural town. Inside the church, Matthew waits anxiously, rehearsing what to say. When Grace emerges, her visibly pregnant figure leaves him stunned. She freezes at the sight of him, her expression cold and wary. "Why are you here?" she asks, arms crossed defensively. Matthew pleads with her, insisting that he means no harm and that he has urgent news to share. After much hesitation, Grace agrees to speak with him, if only to get him to leave. In the privacy of her small apartment, Grace listens as Matthew unpacks his harrowing discoveries. He spoke about the hidden occult room behind Dominic's office where he saw the ring of power. He spoke about Dominic's manipulation of her pregnancy and his ruthless measures to ensure the child was hidden from his congregation. He wasn't sure why, but he felt it was somehow connected to the ring, his resignation, and how his conscience couldn't bear the weight of enabling Dominic any longer, and the unpleasant nightmare he has from time to time, all pointing to the gossip that no one leaves the house of glory without consequences. Tears stream down Grace's face as she processes the danger she narrowly escaped. Her resolve hardens, and she declares that her child will never set foot near Dominic or his church. Before leaving, Matthew gives Grace money, urging her to stay far away from anyone connected to House of Glory. He advises her to move again, somewhere even more remote. Dominic is more dangerous than we ever imagined, he warns. Protect yourself and your child. Grace hesitates, but eventually thanks him. She watches him leave with a heavy heart, still haunted by her past, but determined to shield her child from it. As Matthew drives back to the city, his mind races. He feels a glimmer of hope, having warned Grace, but unease lingers. Suddenly, his car swerves uncontrollably. Tires screech as he collides into a tree. Witnesses rush to the scene, but it's too late. Matthew's body is pulled from the wreckage, lifeless. The official cause is ruled as an accident, but whispers of foul play spread among those who knew him. When Grace hears the news of Matthew's death, her blood runs cold. Though she has no proof, her instincts scream that Pastor Dominic was behind it. She recalls the stories of others who left the church only to meet untimely ends. Fear tightens its grip on her. She debates going to the authorities, but knows it would be futile without evidence and dangerous for her and her unborn child. Grace's quiet defiance grows. She vows to stay hidden and to raise her child with the strength to one day confront the shadow cast by Dominic and his cursed empire. Weeks later at Matthew's funeral, Dominic delivers a stirring eulogy. Brother Matthew was a man of faith and dedication. His sudden loss is a reminder that life is fleeting, and we must always remain steadfast in our service to God. He uses the funeral as an opportunity to reinforce loyalty within the congregation, subtly warning them against questioning the ministry. Behind closed doors, Dominic is haunted by Matthew's death. He begins having nightmares of Matthew standing at the altar, his hollow eyes accusing him. Matthew's death does not go unnoticed by the congregation. Whispers circulate. Have you noticed how anyone who leaves the church never prospers? Matthew was such a good man. How could this happen to him? These whispers sow seeds of doubt, weakening Dominic's once ironclad control. The spirits demand more sacrifices, pushing Dominic further into darkness. A new chapter. Grace decided to stay at the church, where Mama Esther and the congregation supported her throughout her pregnancy. They became her family, surrounding her with love and prayer. Months later, Grace gave birth to a healthy baby boy she named David. She held him close, vowing to protect him at all costs. "You are a miracle," she whispered. "God has a plan for you, my son." Though she had no intention of returning to the city or Dominic's world, Grace carried the weight of his threat. She told no one the true identity of David's father, determined to keep him safe from the man who had tried to erase his existence. David's faith-filled upbringing. David grew up in the small church community, surrounded by love and faith. Mama Esther became like a grandmother to him, and the congregation treated him as their own. Grace poured her heart into raising him, teaching him the importance of kindness, humility, and trust in God. Despite their modest means, David grew into a bright and compassionate young man. He spent his days helping in the church, studying scripture, and assisting Mama Esther with her community outreach programs. "You are destined for something great," Grace often told him. "Never forget that God saved you for a reason." The house of divine glory continued to flourish under Dominic's reign. It'd been more than 2 decades of deceiving the Lord people. When David was about to clock 20 years, he began to experience vivid dreams. In one, he saw a towering church filled with people crying out in pain, their wrists and ankles shackled by chains. At the altar stood a shadowy figure, holding something that glowed ominously. A voice spoke clearly in the dream.
"Your father's house is in chains. You must bring light."
David's heart pounded as the dream faded, and he awoke trembling. Coming up next on The False Prophet and the Ring of Power. As soon as David crossed the threshold, everything changed. A heavy silence fell as the congregation one by one began to collapse, groaning as though waking from a long and torturous dream. What is happening?" Dominic stammered, stumbling backward. The members began to rise, their eyes wide with clarity. Tears streamed down their faces as they looked around in confusion, realizing for the first time how long they had been enslaved.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video.